Ollie may be one of the most interesting yet mystifying brawlers in the game. Imagine a brawler who was basically perfectly balanced, perfectly designed as a tank, and one of the few true tanks Brawl Stars had. But in Brawl Stars, this would never happen. And so, probably Brawl Stars' biggest fumble in terms of balancing happened with Ollie. And in this video, we'll take a look at Ollie, his basics, and then talk further about him, and what makes him stand out. And then we'll talk about the absolute fumble that Brawl Stars did with him. If you want a fun place to talk about Brawl Stars, join our Discord server. Link will be in the description. Also, make sure to subscribe to keep up with the PowerPoints. Finally, if you want to help support the channel and become a member, you also get to choose new PowerPoint brawlers and help me out, as my members chose Ollie. Also, if you like the music in the video, it's all made by me, so check my music channel out if you're curious for more. Let's start out with the basics. Ollie has a health of 10,800 with a fast movement speed. Ollie's main attack seems him shoot a relatively thin cone-shaped attack that deals 1800 damage, with a 1.8 second reload speed, and a range of 6.33 tiles. Ollie's super sees him dash forward, and after 1.5 seconds creates a sound wave of 3.33 tiles around himself, which hypnotizes enemies, bringing them towards Ollie and unable to attack. The super deals 1600 damage and ends after 2.5 seconds. The basics out of the way, let's get to talking about Ollie. Let's start out with his main attack. Ollie's main attack might be the most interesting out of any of the tanks. It's basically a hard to hit, low damage, mid-range attack, which is something that's contrary to most tanks. When you think of a Brawl Stars tank attack, you think of a fairly strong attack with low range and all auto aim. Not Ollie, however. What implications does this have for him? Well, this makes the attack require much more thought to use. The shot is not only hard to hit, but harder to consistently use due to the poor reload speed it has. This is why it's used more as a poke tool to chip down enemies and more importantly get your super. For Ollie, getting to super as quickly as possible is everything. The very concept of being able to control enemy movement is extremely broken. We see this with Willow and her super, and it's balanced by the fact she's completely unable to move during it. So how is Ollie's balanced? Well, that's the neat part. It isn't. Well, sort of. Ollie loses half of his max ammo the moment his super jazz is complete. However, this isn't really enough of a trade-off, especially compared to how it used to be, which I'll talk about in a bit. But anyway, Ollie's super is extremely useful. Unlike Willow, Ollie's actually able to control the entire enemy team. In Brawl Stars, any amount of control over an enemy, even for just a few seconds, can be game-changing. However, with Ollie, with how his main attack works, you have to rely on your teammates to help. Ollie by himself simply doesn't have the DPS to take care of enemies even when they're hypnotized, so he relies on good teammates to help him out, which is why he synergizes well with big damage dealers and brawlers that have team-wide potential. As for the super usage itself, there's a lot to keep in mind when using it. First of all, the super is best used on brawlers with low health, low DPS, and especially if you're fighting solo. This enables you to actually kill the enemy without relying on teammates who could be in the middle of a fight. However, if you get the whole team together, then you want to use your super on high value targets. This could be brawlers with high star amounts in bounty, high gem amounts in gem grab, or overall menaces that are the highest priority to kill. If you can successfully hypnotize them, then you can get a very good chance of securing an important kill, especially if you have your team with you. Ollie synergizes best with high DPS brawlers, as I said earlier, but also with support brawlers. Support brawlers can enable Ollie to survive matchups he usually wouldn't due to his poor DPS, and gain his all-important super, which can be game-changing. When using the super, if you can catch multiple people lacking, you want to wait until you can get the enemies walking into a straight line. Once you get that, you can attack all of them at once, which also gives you great supercharge. Ollie's super also synergizes well with his gadgets, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a bit. But anyway, the moment before your super is finished, you can use the regulate gadget and jump on the enemy you want stunned to lengthen the hypnotized time, as well as regain important ammo during that time. Furthermore, since Ollie's so weak to crowd control, especially during his super, you can purposely make your super range shorter to try and avoid the crowd control ability, and then use the regulate gadget to get close to enemies again. Overall, Ollie's super and Ollie as a whole is a very interesting and complicated specimen. You can tell he was made to be enjoyed by a select few and not the entire player base. Or was he? Well, let's take a trip back memory lane and look briefly how Brawl Stars fumbled one of the most interesting designs in the game. When Ollie released, he was, well, mid, yet perfect. Mid in terms of his meta placement, he was quite weak by himself, and this was because of one huge change. On release, Ollie could not attack during his super, similar to Willow. This forced him to completely rely on teammates to secure the kill. This made him useless in a mode like Solo Showdown, but also useless in the hands of the wrong players, or with the wrong teammates. In a game like Brawl Stars, where there's so much emphasis on self-sufficiency, having a brawler that relied on teammates to help, to the point where one could consider him a true tank, would unfortunately never last in the game. He would never truly survive in this vicious meta, and more importantly, no one would ever play him. So, Ollie was transformed into another beast entirely. He received a 150 increase to his damage and a complete removal of his silencer. Just 2 changes and this middle of the pack, probably forgotten brawler turned into an S tier brawler. Why? Well, I think we've already established that Ollie has a very high skill ceiling. So even with Ollie v1, pro players and dedicated players could already extract a lot out of him, especially when playing in coordinated teams. However, with Ollie v2, they turned Ollie into another beast. So, pro players basically had him as a must-have now, and even casuals were starting to play Ollie. What the update gave to Ollie was self-sufficiency. No longer did he have to fully require teammates to kill enemies, he could do it by himself, and with his crazy supercharge rate, he could farm supers like crazy. Yes, he was still pretty difficult to master, especially considering his main attack, but if you did master him, he would be insane. At this point, Ollie became more like a dive tank than a true tank. He could dive in with his super and take out enemies, especially those with lower health, which sounds suspiciously similar to that of a dive. Of course, Brawl Stars corrected their mistake, or at least attempted to, with some nerfs to his health, supercharge, and regulate gadget cooldown. However, this was nowhere near enough when his hypercharge rolled around. Ollie's hypercharge sees him have an increased dash range and speed, and he would no longer lose ammo when dashing, while also having a 50% larger radius. On release, this was utterly broken. This turned already one of the best brawlers in the game into probably the best at the time. Brawl Stars had turned a brawler that needed teammates to do anything into someone who could team wipe basically by himself. Obviously, this received heavy nerfs, but the damage was done to Ollie. He was basically unrecognizable from his release date at this point, and Brawl Stars had gone all in on the dive tank classification for him. Add in a few more nerfs and we get to the position where Ollie is today, basically forgotten by most of the player base, being in the B tier. Ironic, since all of this butchering of Ollie's design was made to make him more popular and relevant in the meta. Anyway, let's talk about Ollie's unlockables. Regulate sees Ollie jump 3.67 tiles in the direction he's facing, and hypnotizes the enemy in a 1.67 tile radius when he lands for 1 second. This is a very useful gadget for him. It can be used to get away from enemies or used as a mobility tool, or as an offensive assassination tool to get to enemies and hypnotize them. Furthermore, it also synergizes very well with super as mentioned before. All Eyes on Me sees Ollie's next attack hypnotize enemies for 1 second. This is solid but pretty risky. If used on someone at low health that you want to kill, it can be useful, but it can also drag unwanted people closer, such as a Shelly for example. Overall, it has nothing it does better than Regulate. Ollie's first star power is Kick Push, which sees Ollie gain 20% extra movement speed near walls. This is pretty niche, but Ollie is usually played on more walled maps, so it can be very useful in helping Ollie's mobility even more. Ollie's second star power is Renegade, which sees Ollie gain a decaying shield of 3000 over 4 seconds after using the super dash. Since Ollie usually has to go into dangerous positions when using his super, it's extremely important to actually live, so this gadget's very useful for that. However, keep in mind, it's getting less useful by the day with the increase in damage inflation. Overall, Ollie is one of the most interesting brawlers in the game to me. He started off as a perfect brawler in terms of design, but not in terms of relevance. and because of this, Brawl Stars shaped him into an almost unrecognizable brawler from his release date, turning him into an absolute menace for months. But as they say, all bad things come to an end, and so, Ollie's reign of terror is finally over, and he is back in both mediocrity and obscurity. A big thank you to Hank=NoSkill, also known as Angel, for helping out with this video, and as always, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.